Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this calm evening of everyone being lovely to each other. So, welcome to the stage, the brilliant Mike Naylor.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. A very good evening to you. Thank you for coming out on this lovely warm night.
Microphone.
Oh, yes. Hi. Sorry about that. I was just saying, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for coming out on this very warm night and for giving up the football, the Formula One qualifying, Glastonbury, and Michael McIntyre's The Wheel. It's been the Tring Carnival all day, so it's going to be great to have a carnival atmosphere in here over the next 90 minutes. And when I messaged a friend on WhatsApp that I was going to be hosting an election hustings, she sent back and said, "Oh, I inadvertently wrote ejection hustings." Could have been worse, but I suppose in a sense that's what election day is all about. So Tring is in a new constituency, as I'm sure you know, but if not, it's the constituency of Harpenden and Berkhamsted. We used to be in South West Herts, and in 2019, Gagan Mahindra, Conservative, won the seat with almost a 15,000 majority over David Gort, who stood as an independent. But Mr. Gort won the 4 previous general elections as a Conservative from 2005. And previously, Harpenden was in the Hitchin and Harpenden constituency, and the Conservative Bim Afalami won the seat in 2017 and 2019. Before that, the MP was Peter Lilly, also a Conservative, but Bim's majority 5 years ago was 7,000, with the Liberal Democrat candidate coming second. So our new constituency covers Tring, yes, where I've resided for 24 years, by the way, Berkhamsted, Harpenden, Redbourne, Sandridge, Wheatamsted, Markgate, Flamstead and Aldbury. 2 candidates can't be here tonight. Mark Patton for the SDP, I think his wife has got a big important birthday, and also the Reform candidate, Sabah Saidi. His wife gave birth a couple of days ago. So I'd like you to welcome the 3 candidates and 1 panellist that we have in alphabetical order by party. Firstly, for the Conservatives, Nigel Gardner. Standing for the Green Party, Paul de Hoest. Representing Labour tonight is the Vice Chair of the local party for this constituency, Rebecca Mackenzie. And your Liberal Democrat candidate is Victoria Collins. Now, in a moment, each speaker will have 90 seconds to make their opening pitch. They've drawn lots to decide the order. Then I'll ask them questions myself, and then we'll take your questions before the candidates make a final pitch of 90 seconds at the end. So, first up, with their 90-second pitch, it's Nigel Gardner.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This may be a new constituency, but it's not new to me. My family go back many generations here. I grew up here and I went to school here. Then I went away. First I went to Oxford, then to the BBC, and then Sir Leon Britton, former Home Secretary, asked me to go with him to Brussels to be his spokesman, fighting for fair trade and against business red tape. And from there I set up 3 businesses of my own. I didn't start off a Conservative. I became a Conservative, because as I was building those businesses, I saw the harm firsthand a Labour government can do to our economy. And without a strong economy, we simply cannot afford the public services I think everybody in this room would like to see. Now, whatever your frustrations with the current government, and I have many, there's a real danger Labour will win big in this election. And that will mean building on our green belt, not very far away from here with the Marshcroft thing, taxing our independent schools and damaging our incomes in our pockets. I really don't want to see that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to be a champion for everybody in this room, whoever you vote for and whatever your politics. Thank you very much.
Next, our candidate for the Liberal Democrat Party, Victoria Collins.
Thank you so much to everyone for coming this evening and to the Tring Book Festival for organising this event. It's great to pop down the road. I live just in Berkhamsted, not too far. But the main thing, it's been a real honour to be the Lib Dem parliamentary candidate for this new seat over the last year. And in that time, I've engaged with hundreds of local organisations, whether that's schools, businesses, Tring Together, Sustainable Tring, the Rothschilds Surgery Group, or the East of England Ambulance Trust. But most importantly, I've spoken to thousands of local residents about the issues that matter to you, whether that's your health and social care, and the woman whose sister has been waiting months for cancer treatment, or families whose mortgages have doubled or tripled, and groceries that just keep getting more expensive, or those concerned about the blight on our environment and the raw sewage that's being pumped into our chalk streams and our canal. This cannot go on. That is why I've been campaigning day in, day out on the issues that matter, and why I stand here proudly with a Lib Dem manifesto, which is a bold, fully costed plan to tackle those challenges. Since 2019, support for the Liberal Democrats has grown in this area. We're winning election after election, to the point where Labour have said that this is a non-battleground seat. So the choice here is clear. Do you want more of the Conservatives and more of the same? Or do you want a candidate who's already been working day in, day out, who brings their real-world experience? And I want to be a true local champion and stand on that national stage to stand up for the things that matter. So please do consider voting for myself, Victoria, and the Liberal Democrats. Thank you.
Third up now, please, would you welcome Paul de Hoest with his 30-second pitch. Paul next. On the drawing of lots.
Thank you, Mike.
80 seconds.
And my thanks to all of you for turning out tonight on this lovely summer evening. My wife and I have lived in this constituency for 28 years, and we've raised 3 amazing children in local schools. After 6 years in the Merchant Navy, I became a banker for 30 years, including 15 years as an economist and risk manager at the Bank of England. I'm also an executive coach, and I've led a campaigning NGO. I have also been a Berkhamsted Town Councillor, where I worked with local volunteers to begin the journey towards a net zero carbon town. The country is crying out for change. Our public services have collapsed, and you can't get seen by a GP or a dentist. Bus services have halved, rail fares keep going up, energy prices are sky high, and our waters are so polluted that it is no longer safe to swim in the sea or the rivers. Local authority funding has been cut so much that roads don't get fixed and social care is on its knees. School buildings are crumbling and teacher vacancies have ballooned. Climate change-related extreme weather events happen daily, while the government's own Climate Advisory Committee says we are not doing nearly enough. Inequality has exploded. The wealth of the top 1% has doubled, while for most of us, real incomes have at best stagnated, and food bank usage is at record highs. Our democratic system is also broken. It does not need to be like this. The Green Party have a bold, honestly funded vision to restore public services and ensure that we can live harmoniously with nature. It is a manifesto for people and planet in which we are all safer, happier and more fulfilled. Thank you for listening.
Now, here to speak on behalf of your Labour candidate, Zara Lane, here is the Vice Chair of the Constituency Labour Party, Rebecca Mackenzie.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Mackenzie, and I'm replacing Jim, who unfortunately is ill, who was replacing Zara. So I'm the Vice Chair of Harpenden and Berkhamsted Constituency Labour Party, and I'm also a Town Councillor in Berkhamsted as of May last year. I was actually born in St Albans, but then we did move to London, and I was there for about 40 years. After university, I went into visual arts charities before training as a therapeutic counsellor. And then over the last 20 years, I've been raising my 2 children and working part-time as a counsellor, and working at charities such as Watford Women's Centre and Mind. I had my 2 children in 2003 and 2007, and I really felt that the government had my back at that time, and I wonder if anyone feels like that now. We had the Climate Change Act, we had the Committee for Climate Change set up, but then of course there was the financial crisis, austerity, and then a change of government and the rolling back the green crap. I moved to Berkhamsted in 2012. I actually became a Green Party member for a while. Then came 2016, Brexit and Trump, and then 2018, and I might stumble over this, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change report. And these two events really kind of woke me up, I think. I joined Labour after Keir Starmer was elected, and this was partly because I'd always been, sympathetic, but my husband had worked with him many years ago. My husband's a lawyer, and he'd always spoken extremely highly of him. I believe Labour's plan to bring the government and economy back into the service of working people is an underrated plan which could transform all of our lives for the better. And I also believe Keir Starmer is the stable, rational, pragmatic Prime Minister we so desperately need in an increasingly unstable world.
Okay, your time has run out. Thank you. So, some questions from me, and as you said, you were, Rebecca, a late stand-in. Can you just explain maybe why your candidate, Zara Lane, is not able to be here?
Well, I don't actually know specifically. We did ask her, and she said she was unable to attend, but I didn't press her on that point.
Okay. She said on BBC Three Counties Radio yesterday, she hates public speaking, but loves politics. Very honest answer, but if she was elected, how would she cope?
Well, I think that is a question for her, really.
What qualifies her to be an MP, do you think?
I think she works for an MP, and she's also a borough councillor in Bedford, and so I guess that's quite a lot of good experience.
Does that mean she's not necessarily in touch with what's happening in Tring, Berkhamsted, Wheathampstead and Harpenden?
Well, I think she would try to ensure that she would give up those roles and become a full-time MP. Okay,
well, I've only had one leaflet through my door about her, and the fewest I've had from all of the parties. And in one of the Lib Dem leaflets, Victoria says that Labour has given up winning this seat, officially declaring, quote, it a non-battleground seat. Is that true? Has Labour given up in trying to win here?
It is a non-battleground seat, and one of the things is that we have to focus our resources because we aren't funded by billionaires. So we are focusing our resources on Hemel Hempstead because we believe we have a real chance there.
That's Mike Penning's old seat for the Conservatives. Sir Mike.
And I know that Nigel's leaflets always say this is a battle between Labour and Tory, but we don't accept that because that poll is based on a kind of generalised data, not specific data for Harpenden and Berkhamsted. And anyone who knows Harpenden and Berkhamsted knows... I mean, can I ask the audience, does anyone in here believe that this is a battle between Tory and Labour in this constituency? Is there anyone in the room who believes that? You do, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll
anyway.
come back to you on that, Victoria.
Yeah.
So you talked, there nicely about Sir Keir Starmer.
Yeah.
It's been labelled, though, that he's a bit hedging his bets. In one or two of the debates, he's been like a rabbit caught in the headlights. And if you read some of the right-wing press, they're saying, Armageddon is just a few days away. What can you say to this audience that reassures that taxes won't go up by a lot, that public spending won't go up, and therefore taxing or borrowing?
Well, I can say that he has explicitly committed to not putting up taxes for working people.
Not all of them, though. It could be council tax, it could be petrol tax, it could be stamp duty, you never know.
Well, and what I would say is that the thing that we're not going to do is cut taxes for millionaires and hand them back tens of thousands of pounds that could be put into our public services. If the Conservatives get in again and they cut taxes by 2%, inequality will explode. And where were we going to get the money for public services?
Okay, again, we're on a timing on this bit. Paul de Hoest from the Green Party. You've been a member since, 2009?
Correct.
How much of a chance do you think you have of winning this seat?
In this particular seat, our ambition is to gain 4 MPs nationally, and in the seats elsewhere is to maximise our vote share. Because the important thing about maximising the vote share is that that puts pressure on the mainstream parties. We will get a Labour government, and we need them to know that people hold green values in the nation, and that they'll respond accordingly with policies. In the same way as we've seen politics drag to the right because of the vote share that UKIP, Reform and Brexit Party have got without winning an MP, they've actually pulled politics to the right. And a good strong vote share for the Green Party will do exactly the same.
And what's your experience of talking to voters on the doorstep and in the street over the last 5 or 6 weeks? You know, what are they talking to you about, and what is concerning them? Usual things are concerned more. What I'm hearing from people is strong green values, and people like what we stand for. They like what we intend to do. And so they're worried about housing. They're worried about the health. They're worried about transport and congestion, and they're worried about development on the green belt. But what they really interested in is also. You hear a lot of debate about tactical voting and so on, and I make the same message about how important it is. This seat is a non-battleground seat, which we just talked about earlier with Labour, because they know where they're going to get their absolute majority from. They've got their 400 seats, which they're going to target, and they're going to win. So they will have the government, and so every other seat, what really matters is you vote with your heart for who you really want to win. The Institute for Fiscal Studies analysed the parties, and the Greens and Reform came out as the most expensive. You want more spending on the NHS, school infrastructure, more investment in public transport and cycling, bringing water companies into public ownership. Where would the money come from? It's got to be higher taxes to achieve those aims, surely.
Well, not all of it for a start, but some of it is, and there are higher taxes on proposed on those with the broadest shoulders, which is the
super rich.
The super rich. That's over 10 million and over 10 billion of assets. And there are some higher taxes for people the higher earners, not for all people on middle income and lower earners. And coming back to the point we've had before, if you let public services crumble, if your schools are not fit for purpose, if your health service is not fit for purpose, then people are forced into private health and private education. So in the last year, private education, actually there's been a number, there's been a dozen new private schools opened, and there's been a 4% increase in roles, because people are feeling the need to go there, because the gap between private education and public education has widened. And so that will be more than the taxes increases that we're putting on.
Thank you. Nigel, so why do you want to be an MP?
I want to be an MP largely here because this is the place I grew up. For me, it's about place as well as party. I'm the Conservative candidate, but I would not be doing this for a constituency I didn't know. This is why I want
You've
to
had offers elsewhere, haven't you, to stand?
No, I haven't. I didn't apply anywhere else. I wanted to do it here. This was the only constituency I applied for, because this is the only place I want to do it for.
On that point,
higher,
higher, seeking... Oh.
Why do you think I'm a liar, sir?
Can we give them their 3 minutes?
Well, yeah, we'll give them the 3 minutes. So your literature has concentrated on those local issues, to summarise the High Street, housing on the Greenbelt and Marshcroft, which we'll come to, and so on. Does that mean you think you've got a better chance of being elected by concentrating on local issues because the National Party's been so inept?
I don't think that's true. I think for me it's about both. It's about local issues and it's about national issues. I mean, I really care about this place. As I said, this is the only place I want to do this for. And Marshcroft is a huge, huge issue in Tring. I'm sure we'll talk about it later. In terms of the national issues, I mean, as I said at the beginning, there are clearly things that we all have frustrations about with the current government. It's my job to defend those and to make the best case for what the Conservatives have done in a pretty difficult time for the country. COVID and what have you, we've had a very difficult time, and the government hasn't had an easy card of hands.
You said in your opening speech that you converted from Labour to Conservative because you saw the damage that a Labour government had done to the economy. What specifically, as briefly as you can?
Yeah, I'll give you one example.
What did you think in the way they harmed it? How did they do that?
I'll give you one example. One of the things I found extremely difficult was the constant changes in the tax system when you're running a business. You know, the constant changes in what you can expect, not even the levels of tax. I hear what these two are saying, but it was the constant tinkering with the system. It was the constant insecurities that you find if you're building a business. If you're running a business, you need security from government. You need predictability of the environment in what you're trying to do business in.
According to the Hearts Advertiser last year, your public relations company, G+, allegedly distributed Russian propaganda during the 2008 war between Russia and Georgia. The company sought to ensure that the Russian narrative was being reported in the European media. There were human rights abuses by Russia torturing Georgian prisoners of war. Did you have a direct role in that lobbying, and were you effectively working for the Kremlin?
30 seconds.
It's a long question. So, I actually left in 2008, but I was there in 2006 and 2007, so I take responsibility for this. And I think it's very important to say what we were doing. Russia had just been admitted to the G8, so the International Club of Democratic Rich Nations. And Russia had the presidency of the G8. And our job was to do the media relations for the Russian presidency of the G8 in Berlin, Paris, and Brussels. That was part of it. The other part was Russia had just been allowed into the WTO. I mean, I worked on that in the Commission. And we worked on their trading relations. We also worked for Gazprom on the technicalities of entering the European gas market. This was at a time when the UK and the US government was seeking closer relationships with Russia. And indeed, we had to get US approval to do this, which was given by the US government. So I have no regrets at all about what I did then.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I was asked by a couple of people online about that. Victoria, Liberal Democrats, you don't mind me if I refer to you by your Christian names from now on. What qualifications do you think you have to become an MP? You sort of alluded to it in your speech. So it's kind of working your way towards something bigger with a lot of experience of not only campaigning, but public speaking, researching certain issues and lobbying.
Yeah, can I just say that I'm very afraid of my 3 minutes. So that's a nice question to start with, because you've given a good grueling to all of us. So, I mean, I started my career at the European Parliament and I worked on economic and financial regulation. And then I also, so my master's was economic policy specialised in energy and environment. I then worked for international firms advising on sustainable change, but then also ran my own businesses. But, you know,
will that help people to fight the Marshcroft development or get more shops into the high street and lower business rates and help small businesses?
There is, so, well, I mean, on the other side is what I've said just before, which has spent this whole year actually being on the ground, understanding so many issues of organisations beyond, you know, across the whole constituency. But there is I think it's an important link between knowing the local community, but making that change nationally, because you're voting for a national representative who's going to fight for those legal changes, whether that's, for example, making sure that local authorities get the right funding. I need to understand the difference it makes here to help make that change in Parliament and seeing that happen. But also I mean, the best education I ever had was really helping my mum on the shop floor from this age, actually, you know, and from being in the stomach of my mother, because that was the
real... In a factory or something?
What, sorry?
What shop floor?
I mean, in a gift shop on a high street like Tring. Okay. And that I learned so much about actually how tough it was to run a business, how great it was, but also what it was, you know, the importance of local community.
So much of this campaign, all the leaflets, I think, but it's specifically yours, are a series of pledges or promises, but they don't actually spell out the policies needed to meet those promises. So what does a fair deal on health services, a fair deal on living costs, a fair deal on green space actually mean?
Well, I'll try and sum them up. I mean, we have a very clear manifesto on those in terms of the health and social care. We've looked at whether it's recruiting 8,000 GPs, whether it's about 24/7 lines to be able to contact your GP, whether it's about social care. That's the biggest thing that I've been campaigning on, because not only is it the right thing to do, because we have vacancies, we have a lot of people who cannot get the care that they need, but also the experts that I've spoken to have said that if you look at kind of the front door and back door of our health services, the reason why, and if Mark was here, our SDP candidate, he'd back me up on this, but the reason why actually there's ambulance waiting times, why those waiting times are so high is partly because of social care. So we've got a very bold plan on that, which is fully costed. Okay,
nearly 3 minutes there.
Time hasn't gone off. Oh, it's just going now.
Okay.
Well perfect.
We will, I think, return to the health service. So questions from you now. We've had a lot of questions, and we're not going to get through all of them, and of course you'll understand too, there's quite an overlap between some of them. So I'll do my best to keep moving. So when I call your name out, will you please put your hand up quite quickly so that we can get a microphone to you? And the first question comes from Joe Slade. Joe is downstairs, I was told. Joe's over there. So if we can get a microphone to you. And go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, I just need to find the question.
We can't hear you. Okay.
Sorry, I just need to find the question first.
Do you want me to pose it for you?
If you wouldn't mind, that would be great. I'm just looking through my emails.
Okay. If your party forms a government, what will they do to ensure all of your ministers and MPs maintain the highest levels of integrity whilst in office? Who wants to go first on that? Nigel?
I think integrity in politics is the most important thing possible. And I'm old enough to remember the 2009 expenses scandal. You probably worked on it. And, you know, I just remember how horrible it was at that stage, you know, even thinking or dreaming about being in politics. So I think, you know, you look at this gambling gate and all of this stuff, it's absolutely appalling. And I don't think it's just in the Conservative Party. Of course, we're at the forefront because we're in the government, but there have been Labour MPs involved in it, and also, sadly, protection officers from the police. So people I have a huge admiration for, actually, because they've done a lot of our ministerial visits. So it's terrible, and I'm not trying to avoid responsibility for it, but I think it's all of our responsibilities, actually, and all of the responsibility of everybody in this room, to make sure you have the cleanest possible politics. Because if you don't have clean politics, the whole system just breaks down. In terms of sort of practicalities, you're tightening up on second jobs. I don't think any MP should have a second job whatsoever. I certainly won't have a second job if I'm elected. And from what we've said already in other Hustings, the three of us, I think we're all agreed about that.
And a lot of ministers have broken the ministerial code, and there have been resignations over allegations of sexual misconduct. Boris Johnson tried to prorogue Parliament. There was Partygate. Where's the Labour Party stand on this? Okay. Integrity and honesty.
Yes.
And trust.
And it's a very big part of our manifesto. We will establish a new independent ethics and integrity commission. We will review and update post-government employment rules, enforcing restrictions on ministers lobbying for the companies they used to regulate. We will have meaningful sanctions for breaking the rules. We will set up a modernisations committee to reform House of Commons procedures, and we will have an immediate ban on MPs taking up paid advisory or consultancy roles and from taking up roles that stop them serving their constituents and the country.
Okay, that sounds a good answer, and a bit of overlap perhaps with Nigel on not having second jobs. Paul, what do you think the Green Party's position would be to have trust? Caroline Lucas has always performed really well in the media whenever I've seen her.
Yes, indeed. I think she's set a really good example, and I think that as Caroline Lucas is retiring this election, that the MPs that we do get have got a hard act to follow. And the thing is, there's so many green issues to go for in Parliament, and if we have 4 MPs, they're going to be extremely busy trying to get the green initiatives on every topic that comes up in Parliament. And so they'll be far too busy to be thinking about second jobs, and be far too concentrated on doing a really good job in Parliament themselves.
Okay. Victoria, because I want to move on quite quickly from these early questions, if I may.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are kind of 3 main elements. First, it starts with the candidates that you choose, and then the MPs that you elect. And, you know, we're very serious about, we have our process to choose our candidates, but also it's our members who choose our candidates, and they have to show that integrity to local people. Secondly, though, we do, and a lot of our manifesto is about improving and cleaning up the Acts of Parliament. For example, having ministerial training every year, and hopefully the same minister. Let's see if we can keep them for more than 1 year. But the third thing I would say is proportional representation and electoral reform, because actually what I've seen as I've campaigned more and more is the problem with safe seats and the problem with first past the post is that there are certain seats that just won't change. And then you have people who cannot hold their MPs to account because you can put anyone, we've heard that, you can put anyone in there and put a certain colour rosette and they win. And that's why I think we need to reform that so we can hold our MPs to account.
Okay, Paul, you want to... You wanted to make another point on that quickly?
No, I appreciate you want to move on. I just wanted to make a very quick point, since I think I had quite a short time on that one, and that is that I think honesty is a key part of it. And I think honesty in manifestos is a start to that. The IFS have said that both Labour and the Tory manifestos are not honest about what's going to happen on public finances. And the one thing the Green Party can't be faulted for is being honest about how our policies will be funded.
Okay.
Can I come back on that?
If you wish. So which parties were not honest about their costings?
The IFS reported it when they reviewed that Labour and the
Just
Tory
wanted to show the
manifesto.
manifesto, which actually does have the costings at the back. So.
Can I come in on that?
The
Because,
IFS
I personally think there is not a single political party in this election that has actually been transparent and honest about the costings and the economic challenges which will face this country in the years above. And that is what the IFS has said. So this is a really serious problem for the country, because we're not looking at the figures and the economic challenges we're going to face in the next 5 years.
The figures I read said that there was a black hole of 36 million in the Conservatives and 22 in Labour.
And the Lib Dem it's even bigger.
Is it? I didn't. Okay.
I don't know your black hole.
But I mean, yeah, you're hoping that economic growth comes. If economic growth doesn't magically come, then we're
I
not.
would say there's 36 billion in taxes that goes uncollected every year. So there's something to...
But every government's always said that, and every party's always said that, and they've never managed to collect the money.
Absolutely.
So that's the big problem with that.
Elizabeth Moores, are you in the downstairs here with us? Thank you. Over there, great.
You asking for it. Oh, hang on.
My question, please.
Okay. What would be the first policy you'd like your party to implement if you were elected to govern on Friday morning? Rebecca?
To cut NHS waiting times.
Okay.
Yeah. The 40,000 more appointments each week, I think that would be...
That's the pledge,
step.
40,000 more GP appointments each week.
Maybe not each week. I've typed in each week. I think it said each week, yes. I mean, getting people to work over the weekend and in the evenings to get the backlog down, basically.
Okay.
It's not a permanent arrangement, it's to get the waiting list under control.
We'll come back to that in another question. So, Paul, which policy do you want to see implemented straight away?
I think a commitment on the climate emergency, and so probably one of the most important things on that is to get the public transport investment in.
Okay, Nigel.
Mine would be very similar to yours. It would be on the NHS, and it would be a long-term treatment plan for the NHS, which deals not just with the funding needs, but the organisational needs, and also the challenges facing the NHS. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah, we will. So, Victoria.
We've already said what we like to do, and that is call for an emergency NHS budget. And as you can see, there's a theme here. But what we've said is let's get around the table and say, how do we make this happen, and call for that emergency budget. And I myself would like to convene a meeting of key organisations in the area to make sure that our say is part of that.
Okay, thank you. Keith Baker, are you here in the audience? Would you like to put your question, Keith, and when the microphone arrives? And this is on housing.
It is on housing. Yeah, no, as many of you might know, I'm one of the Grovefield Residents Association Committee, and so my question really is aimed at teasing out the differences between the housing policies of the four people on the stage. How do you balance levelling up the green belt and more housing? And also, obviously, that's on a national basis, but also on a Tring basis, any views on how Tring should grow? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to go first on that, Nigel?
I can start. First of all, Tring owes you a great tribute, Keith, because you were fundamental in stopping the Tring Marshcroft development up to now. So I think we all owe you a huge thanks of applause for that.
But on that point, the development company are going to appeal, are they not?
Yeah, they are going to appeal. So the battle isn't over, unfortunately. And I'd like to talk about Marshcroft, but can we just talk about the general point, first of all? So on the Greenbelt, generally, for me, we just have to protect the Greenbelt. I've seen too much of it disappear in my lifetime. It's one of the reasons I'm doing this. On Marshcroft itself and on the appeal, So they're going to keep on battling away, Redrow. They're not a nice company. They don't really care about housing people. They care about making money. They don't necessarily build the kinds of houses we want to see. And they are going to build 2,000 houses and increase the size of Tring by 30%. We have to fight.
I thought it was 1,400.
It's 2,000, I think, by the latest plan that I've heard.
You got any figures on that, Keith?
Is it 1,400 or 2,000? 1,400. It's a huge development that goes right the way across a huge, great swathe of the countryside over there. I think it depends exactly how you calculate it and the phases. I think it's a terrible idea, and I think it's a terrible idea because of the green belt, but I also think it's a terrible idea because of what it will do to the town. It will increase pressure on GPs, it will increase pressure on roads, it will increase pressure on schools, and whatever these developers say about putting in this and putting in that, it never meets the needs. I think it's a really, really bad idea.
Okay, Rebecca, what would you say to that? I mean, we need more housing, don't we?
We need houses, and I think it is a complex and difficult issue. We have committed to building 1.5 million new homes over the next Parliament, and supporting local authorities by funding additional planning officers. We will take a brownfield first approach, but they have introduced the idea of this grey belt, i.e. the green belt that's not so great.
It's still green belt. It's still green belt.
It may still be green belt, and I think it depends whether you want your children to have houses, to be able to afford to buy houses or not. I think another aspect, actually, because we need to look at this in the round, with all problems, there's always different aspects, and I think one of the problems is obviously the concentration of the economy in the southeast of England, with financial services being the main thing. So with our Green Prosperity Plan, 650,000 more jobs up north, producing renewable energy, and I think, that's a start to get people building up north as opposed to down south.
Okay, but in Roman Park, between Icknield Way and Western Road, 240 new houses have been put up. The minimum one for a two-bedroom when it was built and sold 3 years ago, I guess, maybe 4, was £450,000. A lot of money. And the most expensive ones are up to about £950. It's a lovely looking development, but there's a lot of big 3-storey, 4-bedroom homes, 5-bedroom homes. We need starter homes for single people and for people who are not earning 25k.
Absolutely. And Redrow won't do that. Redrow won't do that.
How do we do that? No, but you support business, but you don't support that business.
What I would do about the house, young people have absolutely the same right as we did to grow up here, but they also have a right to have some countryside left behind. So we have to look at intelligent solutions, which aren't the Labour Party's policy. Keir Starmer has said he is proud to build on the green belt. That is not looking for a solution that works for this community. Looking for a solution that works for this community means doing things about brownfield, as was just mentioned, about densities in new developments. It means doing things about the tax system so that people could downsize without paying stamp duty on their new houses. So, sorry, am I speaking too much?
Sorry, yeah, okay, Paul.
Yeah, I think we need a proper national strategy on this. So what's happened up to now is that central government decided how many houses they think the country needs. They more or less divide that across all the boroughs across the country and then just divvy your share to them. And that's not putting the right houses in the right places at the right price. So what we do need to do is to think about that. It's been mentioned about brownfield. There's 1 million brownfield space for brownfield sites for 1 million homes, to get that right way around, and there are lots of empty homes. There's over 1 million empty homes, and so we'd also have a policy to bring those back in. 2 policies. One is a land value tax, which would mean that your property will be taxed whether it's in use or not, and the second is local authorities could purchase empty properties. But we do need to build more social homes and affordable homes. One of the things that we need to do is we need to look at stamp duty. There's a lot of people of the age of people in this room who'll be sitting in 4 or 5-bedroom houses with many rooms that are not used, because it's actually pretty expensive to trade down in this area. So it's more cost effective to stay in that big house, and actually you could release more properties by changing the stamp duty rules.
So do you oppose Marshcroft in its current form?
I do. I think the Greenbelt is there for a purpose, and it's there to protect market towns and the character of market towns and give people access to them. To the extent that when you've gone through all the, what I'm going to call low-hanging fruit, to the extent, and there will be a need for a substantial number of houses, I think you have new developments, not bolted on the end of existing towns. You do have new towns, and I think that makes sense. And then you build them, they have the proper infrastructure, they have access to them, and you can make them non-car dependent because they have rail access to them.
But how do you make homes affordable for young people who might not be earning upwards of 40, 50k, you know, might have £20,000, and if they have to get a 10% deposit, that also is very, very difficult without the bank of mum and dad. I know, I've got 4 adult kids. So how as politicians, if one of you is an MP on Friday morning, how can you affect the price of homes when they're being built by private companies for profit?
Well, I think you're summing up the problem to begin with, which is currently under this Conservative government, we have a developer-led system. Not only do they often squeeze out of their Section 106 requirements, which is how they then invest in infrastructure, but also there's land banking, and there are statistics again and again that shows they've had planning permission but not building those homes. So as Liberal Democrats, what we're saying is that we need to move to community-led development, so giving more power to local authorities to do what's right for this area. Currently it's a top-down number. The numbers come from, he said, a government, you know, someone in Whitehall makes this number and said, this is how many houses you need here in Dacorum. That is not the right thing for this area. That's what leads to us then having to squeeze areas into Greenbelt which are not right for here. But also, I mean, the Liberal Democrats were the ones who came up with neighbourhood planning, but it hasn't had enough teeth until now to actually give people the say to be able to work with their local authorities to make that happen. We're saying let's move towards community-led development, which people know here that, for example, we may need smaller homes, we may need more high density, all of it being high quality and sustainable. That is absolutely fundamental, but that is a good start. I do want to answer on Marshcroft, if possible, but then very happy to...
Are you against it or for it?
I'm very much against it. I think that we absolutely need the right homes here, but that development is not the right area at all. Squeezing that between the AONB and the train station, it's just in a bottleneck in Tring. It's not the right development for this area.
Dangerous from a road safety point of view, I would have thought.
Well, indeed. I mean, it's 1,400 houses on the edge of that. You know, what a reminder of that is actually the Conservative leadership of the Dacorum left us without a local plan, and that is why there was then open to speculative development. And that's the idea that actually these developers could say, you don't have a local plan, here is a proposal. And so actually under Liberal Democrats we've worked hard to get a local plan which excludes Marshcroft, so actually does have housing for this area but is not in Marshcroft.
But in Hemel Hempstead. Yeah, okay. Sarah Coren emailed 4 questions. I like the one and want to pick the one that she asked about NHS funding. How do you propose to improve not only NHS funding, but also the efficiency of the NHS in this area? Paul de Hoest.
I think the funding we picked up on already. There's an overall costed manifesto which has big demands for funding, and we've talked earlier on about the wealth taxes and that to pay for it. In terms of where that money would go and what that would do, we need to fix the front end, the back end and the hospital itself. So the front end is GP services, and there's 2.5 billion of that money goes into improving GP services, so you can get your appointment and you can get your dental appointment. So.
But that won't happen, in the first few weeks of a new government, will it?
Not in the first few weeks, no. It'll take time to do that. Of course it does. This takes time over the lifetime of the Parliament, so I don't think the problems in the health service can be fixed in the first few weeks, and you wouldn't expect that.
But is the answer as well not only to spend more money training nurses and GPs?
100%. 100%. So we will be recruiting. There's 100,000 vacancies that we need. So in the first instance, that needs to be recruited. But one of the issues is that during the period of austerity and tight money over the last sort of 14 years, it's been easier for the health service to recruit people from overseas that continue to train people. So we have to immediately set up a long-term training program. And that, by the way, brings us back to immigration. We're not going to get immigration down until we structurally don't have the requirement for them. And so that means training people for that. It also
that takes years in the case of medics, doesn't it?
I'm sorry?
That takes years in the case of medics.
It does take years. The other thing we also need to do is to pay them properly, and then we don't lose so many from the profession. The two primary reasons that people are leaving the profession, and in many cases going abroad, one is they're being overworked, because there's not enough people employed. The second is they're underpaid compared internationally. So we have to be competitive on that. So that's key to do that. The other thing in the health service we have to do, I'm going to mention it at the back end, is social care. We have to invest in social care, which is decrepit here. We need a proper career structure, properly paid for the social care sector. Again, there's 150,000 vacancies there, and currently you've got people waiting up to 2 or 3 months before they can actually, who are ready to leave hospital, but unable to because there isn't the social care facilities for them. And we need to fix that, and that will have a big impact on fixing within the hospital, because actually the doctors and consultants and the nurses in the hospitals, quite often they're there, available, ready to do work, but they can't because there's no bed available.
I get that. Thank you. Thank you. The Lib Dems want to make it possible to see a GP within 2 weeks or 24 hours in an emergency and cut ambulance waiting times. Nobody from any political party would object to that. But again, it's the question of how you make that happen, Victoria. How do you? And make cancer treatment quicker too.
So the first thing is being very clear where we get that money from. There are two main areas. One is actually, so under the Conservatives, they cut taxes to the banks. I think it's bank levy and surcharge tax, which was to the tune of about £4 billion per year. We're saying, let's turn that around. I don't think those bankers need that money, NHS does. The second thing is capital gains tax reform. Now, what we're saying is actually most people would get a tax cut. So those on the lower end, there's exceptions for primary residents, etc. But we're talking about the higher earners, so those like multimillionaires who are actually often paying less on that capital gains loophole. Let's increase the tax there, and we're estimating that, and that's an underestimation of about £5 billion per year. But then we've looked at that and said, okay, well, if we want to have GP appointments, we need 8,000 new GPs, half from actually helping to retain some of those who are leaving, but also recruit some new ones.
With higher wages, like Paul was suggesting.
What we said is we need an independent pay body to say, give them the right salary, absolutely. But also is, the main thing, and I've been campaigning a lot on this, is that social care piece, and Paul's mentioned that as well, because actually so many experts are saying that the backlog is also linked to the lack of social care and investment there, and so there could be potential savings from investing in social care.
But to charge, between £6,000 and £8,000 per month to have your elderly father in hospital or mother in a care home rather is extraordinary, isn't it? And they've had to, a lot of families sell the home, It's extraordinary that. So, Nigel.
Can I just come back on the social care? I mean, we've talked a lot about social care in our various different hustings, and I think we basically agree about it. My father just had this problem 3 weeks ago. He was stuck in hospital because there was nowhere for him to go. And if Mark Patton was here, who's one of our other candidates, who's actually works in a hospital, he would tell you a lot about social care. He's not here tonight. So we all agree about that. The question is what we do about it. We have to implement the Dilnot report. And there is now agreement on the cap, the 86,000 cap, by Labour.
Was that the report commissioned by Boris Johnson years ago?
No, it was long before that. It was 2010, the Dilnot report.
Sorry, there's not agreement there. Lib Dems and the Greens have it free personal social care.
Between Labour and the Conservatives. You're right, Paul.
Yeah, you'll charge at least 86,000.
Yeah, well, I think we all think that cap is, we have to deal with the finances of running the country. We're not with the major parties rather than the small parties. So I don't think we would disagree with going that extra bit, but we have to make the books budget, the books balance. I just want to come back to your question, actually, because you asked locally. And we could talk about our views about the NHS, and I think the NHS has real funding problems, real organisational problems, and real challenges about obesity, about increasing rates of cancer amongst the young, and about ageing. But you asked locally, and I'm very much in favour of moving the NHS from it being a national sickness service to a national health service, and that means prevention.
That's my line. It's in our manifesto. You've been reading our manifesto.
I'm willing to steal the best ideas from anywhere.
We have to go to either Watford or...
Exactly. So on the
Stoke
hubs, so
Mandeville.
one of the things we're trying to do, and I think is a really good idea, is these hubs. I would like to see one for Harpenden. We're going to have one for Hemel. You know, the hubs where you have a load of preventative medicine services all under the same roof, including mental health as well as physical health, as well as work on exercise and on diet. Because we are becoming sicker. We are becoming more obese.
And living longer.
And we're living longer. I mean, that is the real problem behind the NHS. And whichever party is in government, if we're getting older and we're getting fatter and we're getting sicker, money alone will not solve the problem.
Very quickly, I don't want to get...
Can I
Let's go to
answer?
Labour.
Okay, so yes, so it is to turn it from a sickness service and to prevent ill health in the first place. As we all know, a stitch in time saves 9. So we do want to move to neighbourhood health service. We want to have neighbourhood health service centres to help integrate health and care services, bringing together doctors, nurses, care workers, physiotherapists, palliative care and mental health specialists. So bringing healthcare closer to home. We want to have a long-term workforce plan to train up the staff we need. We want to double the number of state-of-the-art cancer scanners. And we say that COVID-19 showed us how a mission-driven partnership between government, business and academia could turn the tide on a pandemic. And this is the approach we want to take with the NHS. I mean, there's a lot more I could say.
But even this week, we've seen that PPE has been dumped, and a lot was wasted during COVID.
Yes, indeed.
We don't want to get into the technicalities of how that was funded and new companies coming in. Is there, people say there's a lot of wasted money and top-heavy management in the NHS.
That's why it's
true?
better to be preventative than to...
Can we go in for major reorganisation to make the point of need services faster and more efficient,
definitely.
and maybe reduce the workforce of
Definitely.
managers?
Well, if they're neighbourhood centres and people can access it more quickly, and we're looking at people holistically, you know, because mental health problems, this is something I do know about, have a lot to do with inequality, the inequality in our society. It puts a huge strain on people. So if we can think more holistically about making a more equal society, then that actually also deals with physical and mental health problems. And also, if we can obviously intervene more quickly, people don't get so sick, and we save money.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're right, it isn't just about money. Don't take my word for it. You know, Matthew Taylor, the chief executive of the NHS Confederation, said money will not fix a broken system. And there is so much in the NHS system which is broken. Everything from things we were talking about, moving from, you know, towards preventative care, towards how we should be ageing. So, you know, it isn't just about money, it's also about looking at solutions which will deal with the problems we're all facing.
But why hasn't the Conservative Party done something about that in the last 14 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great... You know, the Conservative Party looked after the country when it was facing the biggest health crisis it's faced in 50 years, the pandemic, and I think you should say thank you. I mean, we know Partygate was a... Sorry, am I speaking?
I think I'm going to say thank you to the NHS for saving us through COVID period rather than Conservative government, actually. But I think the key thing, coming back to your point, Mike, is about the internal workings and machinations of the NHS. All the internal reorganisations and this internal market and so on and subcontracting has created a Byzantine complexity, bureaucratic complexity to the NHS. And one of the things you have to do is simplify that. You would never run, a private company would never run a national company and have all the shops around the country competing with each other. You centralise things and make them run efficiently that way. You would also stop the creeping privatisation. The NHS was set up as a public service for the public, and it's not as it's becoming now a private service for the public. And we would stop that, because every time you subcontract out to the private sector, that's profit margins going out and that's money leaking out of the system.
Okay. Is Joseph Stopps here? Joe Stopps, do you want to put your question yourself, Joseph?
Wait for the microphone.
Wait. You did. It's okay. Well, I'll ask you, Joseph. Do you acknowledge there is a climate emergency, and what are you going to do to reduce the carbon we're putting into the atmosphere, which is destroying the future for our children? Paul, you might know something about this.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've probably got about a minute to talk about our entire manifesto, I should think. Okay, yeah, so absolutely there's a climate emergency. We've known about this for at least the last 60 years. People have been warning about what would happen if we kept pumping greenhouse gas emissions into the atmosphere and what would happen to temperatures. Those forecasts have been remarkably accurate, and we're seeing the effects now. We haven't got a climate emergency in front of us. We're living through it already. We already passed 1.5 degrees, which is what was agreed at Paris, and we've seen already the effect that's having in extreme weather conditions and excess, people dying of heat exhaustion and so on, and crop failure is already beginning. So there's three key areas you might start on. Transport, I mentioned about public transport earlier on. We do need to sort of get people onto public transport, because buses and trains and indeed cycleways are far more efficient on greenhouse gases than us all driving around in cars. Secondly, to the extent we do have cars, of course we need to accelerate the EV programme, and that means investing in the charger network, and it means bringing forward the times when we need to get out of our diesel cars and into EVs. And we'll do that with various grants and incentives and so on. Airlines, we don't want to expand Luton Airport. We need to stop too many flights. So as a frequent flyer level, we'll stop the waiver on fuel for airlines and so on. Energy, a massive investment in renewable energy, whether it be wind power or tidal power and so on, and as well as using less energy by a nationwide insulation programme and heat pump programme for houses. And in houses themselves, new build houses should all have solar panels and heat pumps as standard. You shouldn't have any new build houses that are not at least carbon neutral.
Okay. You agree with most of that, do you, Victoria?
And that's just the beginning.
You agree with most of that, yeah?
Well, I mean, absolutely. In this sense, I mean, the environment has been so important to me that a long time ago I decided to specialise in energy and environment. It's been core to a lot of what I've done. And that's also why I'm a Lib Dem as well. We have fantastic green policies, and actually we were the party who introduced the world's first green bank, and also started, we didn't do everything right, I admit that, and I was not a member at that time, but we put in place actually retrofitting to really help upgrade homes. And imagine where we would have been at this moment in terms of our energy efficiency and cost if the Conservatives hadn't stopped that. But what we have then is a plan to start that again and actually require landlords to increase their energy efficiency, which has been a real bugbear of mine. I think it's really important about equality as part of this, and also starting on lower social incomes. It seems like you've got a question coming
Well, I was going to say that when electric car charging points were put in Market Street car park, there were people complaining that they took up too much space on social media sites like Everything Tring. You know, I'm not sure whether where people's position is on this in terms of the electorate, because electric cars have become more expensive, haven't they?
I mean, everything is becoming more expensive, unfortunately. But that's also why, actually, at the heart of what our plan for growth is an industrial plan, putting green technology at that. So that's upskilling, that's really making sure as we grow, we can bring that kind of green change with us. But we're looking to have 90% renewables by 2030. That's not only good for the planet, but it's good for our energy security. But the other thing is to make that happen. So we want to have a Chief State Secretary of Sustainability within the Treasury. We want to have a net zero authority that works across departments to make sure this happens, but also, coming back to your point, is having citizens' assemblies, and we're bold enough to say, let's get people involved in this, because enough people want to see that change. Okay,
the Labour Party wants to create a new green energy company, doesn't it?
Indeed. We want, actually this
What does that mean exactly?
Well,
what
it will be owned by the British government, and we will actually get income from it, rather than the income going to shareholders and leaking out of the system.
From wind generators and things like
that? It will be all renewable energy, GB energy. But it is actually, we want clean power by 2030, a zero carbon electricity system. It is actually the backbone of our industrial strategy. And we envisage at least 650,000 jobs coming from this, and this will be up north and in Scotland, actually. We're going to pass an Energy Independence Act, because we want to make sure that we become independent in terms of our energy supply. We have a warm homes plan, 6.6 billion invested over Parliament to obviously insulate people's homes. We are looking at adaptation. Obviously, we want to plant millions of trees. like Sadiq Khan, he's planted 500,000 trees in London already. And we want to move to a circular economy. So it is absolutely core to our vision of the future of Britain that we will have clean energy and we will drive down CO2 emissions, and we want to be zero carbon by 2040.
It sounds a big plan, it sounds a big vision, it sounds very ambitious.
It's actually a very exciting, for a manifesto that doesn't have any policies, I think it's rather good.
Yeah, well,
According to the...
so, forgive me if I'm wrong, I don't hear Rishi Sunak talking in those terms. I just hear him trying to reduce national insurance and taxes to bribe us to vote for him.
I think we all agree we need to get to net zero, and we all agree we need to get there.
Does he?
In the Tory party?
Indeed.
Doesn't he sort of put on the back burner the dates?
Well, let me finish the answer. We all agree we need to get there, and we need to get there as soon as possible, but we have to take people with us, especially when there's a cost of living crisis. And I looked at some of you may have seen them last week, these quite horrifying results coming out of France in the European elections last week, when 40% of 18 to 25-year-olds voted for what was the Front National before, the far-right party. And if you don't take people with you, you get that kind of bad result, which I don't want to see that happening in this country. And so we have to take people with us. But we also have to look at the low-hanging fruit. And you mentioned one, which I think is very important in this room, which you don't get to net zero by doubling the size of our local airport. You just don't get there. So we need to look at the low-hanging fruit as well. And also you mentioned Rishi Sunak. Since 1990, this country has halved its CO2 emissions. That's not a bad record. We should be proud of what we've done already and agree to go further, but not force people.
How can you persuade more of us to go electric with our vehicles? I mean, is there any more incentives?
Yeah, so I wanted to come back on the price of electric vehicles. Yes, they are ridiculously expensive now, particularly when you think about it. An normal internal combustion engine has got 2,000 moving parts, whereas an EV has 20 moving parts. These things should be cheaper. Why are they not cheaper? Well, if you're a car manufacturer, you've got all this investment in the existing cars that you've got, and there's a timeline further ahead for EVs. What would you do? You actually have the price of EVs relatively high because you get the people who are committed to it, and in economics terms are inelastic buyers, and so they'll buy them, and you sell as many of the fossil fuel ones as you can. And then extending the time out for phasing these out, we've made it that last longer. And I can remember when solar panels, back in 2012, when the Conservative government actually, they reduced the FIT tariff, they halved it overnight, and that caused an awful lot of anguish in the industry. What happened to the price of solar panels? They fell by 40% within about 3 weeks. And that's what will happen here. And so the Green Party would bring forward actually the time when you can no longer buy a new internal combustion engine vehicle, and you'll find exactly the same will happen when all vehicles have to be EV. The prices will come down.
Okay, well,
I mean, what we've seen in Germany, just come back, in Germany they've put back the date because people are so upset about it politically and they're worried about the political consequences. So I literally think we all agree about this, but we just have to take people with us, otherwise it will backfire.
On Saba's reform leaflet that came through my door, he's not here, but he thinks that reforms say they will scrap net zero taxes. I read a lot of stuff again in right-wing papers that say that we're being taxed too heavily for that, and it's a waste of money.
Well, that's a good reason not to vote for reform.
Can I let you know that reform is 97% of reform's funding comes from the fossil fuel industry?
Okay.
Wow.
He can't defend himself, but
So it's
that
not
is the case for
surprising.
not voting for him.
Let's take a slightly different tack, shall we? Anonymous questioner, what will you do to protect single-sex spaces for women and girls? We've not heard too much about this in the run-up, I guess, over the last 5 weeks, but so let's do this quickly. But Victoria.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to start by setting the scene that we've had a system in this country for 20 years now where actually most people, the gender they identify as the same as their physical birth, but there's less than 1% who do not identify that. And actually we've had a system under the Gender Recognition Act which allows them to change their sex with safeguards in place. Coming back, though, to the question, what is important is, of course, that we need to have a kind-hearted debate and a proper debate, bringing dignity and safety for everyone. And what we have in place right now is the Equalities Act. Now, the Equalities Act talks about how you can't, in terms of different characteristics, you need to maintain equality. However, there is a part that says under certain exemptions, there can be exceptions, and that includes for trans women. But what we're saying is actually that needs to be clarified for certain situations. But let's use the rules that are in place to make sure, and experts, to make sure that it's right and that it's there's dignity and safeguarding for everyone.
Yeah, there's two issues here. It seems to me that, the reasons for, say, people wanting to trans, and then there's the actual practical difficulties of if a man is transitioning, should he be allowed into a women's changing room?
I think, but that oversimplifies the debate at the moment, because what we're talking about.
Does it?
But what people talk to me about, for example, is if there are spaces, for example, where women have come across sexual violence, etc., and want to have those safe spaces, then actually, absolutely, there should be real clarity using the equalities of what that means.
So we need a third changing room, do we, for trans people, or four if it's a woman transiting to a man?
I think that's up to. I mean, I'll tell you, there are shops where there's one changing room or one room. I think that's up to each store to make that decision. I'm not, as a politician, here to make that decision for them.
Okay. Nigel, you were...
I think women's refuges should be for women and women only, and I think women's prisons should be for women only. And I think women's sport should be for women only. And that's not because I don't want tolerance and respect in this debate. I absolutely echo the fact we should have tolerance and respect in the debate. But, people that are vulnerable and need the state to look after them, and they need to be in these places, should feel safe.
Paul?
Yeah, I think we can be too extreme about these things. I think it's really important that trans people are not discriminated against as the same as any other protected characteristic. And the issue with women's refugees and women's wards in hospitals, I think, is about safeguarding. If people are properly trained, who is looking after these people, they can spot some perv who just dressed up as a woman this morning, decided to pretend to be a woman and go in there. They'll spot that person a mile off. And so I think that the risk from that sort of thing is actually very low. Now, this is not to say that people shouldn't feel discomforted. Of course they should. So there's an element of counselling and care needed. And when people... I'm sorry, I didn't catch...
Ladies' toilets don't have bouncers.
I think, funny enough, the thing about toilets, it's a mystery to me that we have ladies and gents toilets, and I don't know why we don't have unisex toilets everywhere, to be perfectly honest.
Okay, let's move to quickly Rebecca.
Okay, so, I personally think, it is on a case-by-case basis, really, and we need a common-sense approach. The Equality Act, which we passed 2010, does afford women single-sex rights and protections. And I remember back in the 80s, where we had women-only spaces at our parties, I don't remember any Conservatives really appreciating that at the time. But I'm really glad that you do now. People do. But I think that, I listened to Kemi Badenoch talking about if you're born a certain sex, then you stay that sex for the rest of your life. So if you're born a female who transitions to be a man and you now have a penis, you can go into a women-only space. Is that right? You see, when we start to unpick this, it becomes rather complicated, and I think it's about the actual cases, actual people being sensible and pragmatic, and yes, let's have unisex toilets, for God's sake.
Okay, thank you. Caroline Strander put a question. Shall I ask it?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, just special needs. As a parent to two daughters with special...
Hang on.
Sorry, would you like to put it? Okay.
Is the microphone there?
Sorry, okay. Caroline, it's an important question.
Sorry, I wanted to ask it because it's quite personal to me. As a parent to two daughters with special educational needs and now having retrained as an independent SEND advisor, I think the airtime given to SEND so far in the campaign has been woeful. Are your parties brave enough to undertake the wholesale reform that is so desperately needed across schools, mental health services and local government processes to ensure that children with SEN do not have to suffer from mental health crises before they can access the provision that meets their needs?
Nigel.
It's funny you mentioned airtime, because we talked, three of us, on radio about this yesterday, and it did get airtime on the BBC, so it is out there. But you're utterly right about the issue. Now, if I was defending the Conservative position, spending on SEND since 2015 has doubled, but it's doubled because the demand for the services has become even greater. So we have a real issue as a country here, because the demand is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We were also talking about the failure of Hertfordshire County Council to actually get the SEND plans done on time, and it's under 40% that are done in the statutory limit.
Why is that?
The BBC reporter said to me, "Oh, you're criticising a Conservative county council." Yes, I am criticising them, because that shouldn't be the way it should be done. As you say, this is hugely important to a large number of people. We all come across this story on the doorsteps. We all have meetings about this, and we're not doing what we should be doing for these children.
So the county council's got the funding for it, but it didn't deliver. Is that what you're saying?
Well, when you talk to them, they say it's partly about funding, but it's also about the way they're organised and the way they deliver the service they're supposed to do. It's not just about funding. All of these things, it's never just about funding. It's also about the way things are organised.
Yeah, resources is certainly a part of it. So we all know that special education needs is in crisis. It's taken far too long for assessments to be carried out, and even when assessments have been carried out and needs identified, the schools are not in a position to provide them. And so currently there's about £10 billion which is allocated for SEND, and the Green Party proposing to increase that to 15 billion, and it will be completely reorganised so that it can meet these needs. Local authorities will be mandated to provide transport to school for those children that need it. And also every school will have a counsellor, and every school will have a nurse to provide additional resources and support for all of this. And what all of this will do will give the support required to children with special education needs, but it also will put resources back to the rest of the school, which is being diverted for that very reason. Thank you.
I imagine, again, maybe like other aspects of health provision, it might depend on where you live. You might get my daughter as an NHS counsellor dealing with SENS in Manchester, in Tameside, and it's different there.
I'm sure there's a postcode lottery to it, but it certainly is a problem in this area.
Okay, Rebecca.
Well, I think that this fundamentally comes down to the funding of our public services, and let's not forget austerity, where public services were cut by a third. Now, if you cut your income expenditure by a third, you will notice a lot of difference. So we are talking about obviously putting money back into education through the tax, ending tax breaks for private schools, and we are talking about mental health provision in schools. And I think there is more on SEND in the manifesto. I was just looking for it and I can't find it. But I think the overall point that I would like to make is we actually have a decision to make at this election. Do we want a welfare state? Because if we do, we cannot afford another Conservative government. They are giving 2% tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires. Where will that money go? Into their pockets. It will not go into public services.
Sorry,
I do not know what state the welfare state will be in if we get another Conservative government.
We don't hear the term welfare state mentioned.
We're cutting 2% off the national insurance of working people, and I think that's a very good thing. And the point is on SEND, and the question was about SEND. The budget has doubled. Can I just finish on this? The budget has doubled since 2015 on SEND.
I think you've already said that.
The problem is it just doesn't meet the increased demands. It's just there's so much more demand.
Okay, Victoria.
I mean, to your original point, I want to say also that I'm sorry that you feel that way, but the sad reality is so much is falling apart right now. It's, where do you choose? And actually, I think the health and social care piece has almost been part of that, because I've been obviously speaking to local, it's the EHCP plan comes from the health service that then comes back into schools, etc. I mean, for us, I mean, as in here in the county in Hertfordshire, we have absolutely been let down. So yes, there's Conservatives here and funding, but if we look at per capita just next door in Buckinghamshire, they got more money, so that the councils here did not fight on our behalf of their children and parents. Oh, did you want to come back? Yeah.
Very quickly.
I just wanted to make a couple of points in response to a few of your comments. Firstly, it doesn't matter how much money you put in if the system is broken, and the system is broken. So putting money into a broken system is pointless. Secondly, so many parents have to put their children into small private schools because they cannot cope in big mainstream schools. So by putting VAT on private schools, you are hurting the most vulnerable children in education.
That is not true, because the parents of children with special educational needs will be exempt from the VAT.
Only if they've got an EHCP. Exactly.
Well, I mean, coming back on what we'd like to do about that, I mean, some of it is money. I mean, that is funding but that is also for infrastructure. I mean, I've spoken to teachers who have shown me the tiny place that's left for the children that have special educational needs, and it's just not fair. You know, sitting underneath network cables is not the space that someone is going to be able to live to their full potential. So some of that is that resource to invest in the right place. But we're also saying let's have a national body so that those who have extra needs, we get rid of that postcode lottery, and that it's up to a kind of national body to make sure that we get the fair provision for each child.
Quickly on VAT, you wanted to mention?
Well, we have segued onto VAT, which is just an issue we haven't spoken about tonight, but it's been very important to my campaign, because I think it's bad for kids at private schools, and I think it's bad for kids at state schools because there'll be more pressure on places, and I also think it will be bad for some of the SEND children that we're talking about, and it doesn't raise any money. So I just think it's a crazy idea.
We don't know.
1.5 billion.
We've seen the figures coming out by the research bodies. So I think it's an ideological policy that will damage children across the board.
I don't think it's ideological.
Sounds like
I think it's to raise 1.5 billion. And, you know, there are children with special educational needs whose parents cannot afford to put them in private school. So we do need state provision on this as well.
Paul, quickly, then we'll move on.
So since we have moved on to VAT on private schools in the broader context, the fees on private schools have gone up in the last 10 years, 50% in real terms. The money allocated to state schools per head of pupil has gone down by 9% in real terms. So that funding gap has massively widened between the two groups of people. So why is it that 93% of children should be deprived in schools and 7% of the children are favoured? I think people are perfect. There's 1% of the pupils in private schools that are on full bursaries. So, yeah, people are perfectly entitled to take their children and send them to private school for the better resource schools, for the bigger playing fields, for the more access to music and art and all of those things, and for the smaller class sizes and all of those things. And indeed, the better networks, the elite networks that you make from that. They're perfectly entitled to make that choice. But I don't think the rest of us should be subsidising you for making that choice.
But the point is... The point is, all the other children will suffer because of this policy, because there'll be more kids in state schools being bigger class sizes.
There's plenty of...
Your front bencher, Thornbury, accepted this the other day. You are prepared to let class sizes increase for the ordinary children.
There's plenty of space for anyone who wants to come to a state school, by the way.
School rolls are falling.
This is an interesting one.
There is, because the birth rate has gone down, and there are schools, primary schools, that are closing because they haven't got enough children in them. So as it works through the system, maybe not here.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I want to squeeze in one more question before a sort of humorous one.
Do I get a say on that?
You want to come back on that?
On VAT in schools.
Yeah, very quickly.
What I've seen, I think it was a well-intentioned proposal, but what I find sad is that it's put parents and children at the heart of a debate like this, which is divisive at a time when actually the tax burden on working people, and I know working people across the board is highest since Second World War. What we say as Liberal Democrats actually is that we're not for taxing education. We should look at the charitable status. Are these schools really living up to their charitable status? But we've looked elsewhere to say, look, yes, there are a lot of people. There is money out there, and as I've said, there are ways that we've looked to collect that, whether that's from the banks, whether that's from capital gains tax of multimillionaires, whether that's also our oil and gas companies that are making massive profits, or whether it's the water companies making massive profits.
Okay.
There are other ways that are raising that money needed, not putting children and parents in the centre of that
Sounds like we
debate.
could spend the whole evening on this. Peter Thompson asked this. He says, this year, all the major political parties have committed to making time for an assisted dying bill in the next Parliament. In Berkhamsted and Harpenden alone, I don't know where he's getting these figures from, but he says 81% of voters back an assisted dying law for terminally ill and mentally competent adults. Before I vote, I want to know where you all stand on this issue.
I'd love to come into this because it's been a real eye-opener, because funnily enough in my inbox one of the biggest issues that comes through is this, and I've had some heart-wrenching stories of people sharing with me their personal story of saying life is getting difficult for me, I'd like to have a dignity in the choice of how I end that, and so I've been lucky enough never to be in that position, but I've wholeheartedly backed and said that I would support an assisted dying bill that goes through and help to push that through for those who need it.
Rebecca?
I think this should not be a party political issue. So I think, it would be a vote of conscience. I personally am in support, but I do think it needs to be very carefully handled. And what I noticed when my parents died was the amazing, amazing palliative care that they got. And I think we need to make sure that we are offering that as well.
But we could discuss the funding of hospices. We don't have time. Paul?
I think as a principle, we should be in control of our own lives, and therefore I think by implication we should be in control of our own deaths. And so I think in principle I'm for this. Of course it needs an awful lot of safeguarding around when this will happen, who's involved and who approves it, particularly because people are usually very vulnerable at this particular time of their lives, and so we need to be very, very careful about it. But I would certainly, in principle, support the assisted dying bill.
Tricky one. Nigel?
Yeah, I'm in favour of this change with the right level of safeguards, and I agree it shouldn't be party political. And it isn't just my inbox. People write and ring to meet to talk about this. This is really affecting lives of people in this constituency, and people having to make very difficult choices. So, the world's moved on, and we have to look at it, and we have to change it, but we do have to be very attentive to the safeguards in the legislation.
Fine, thank you. Final question, I'll put this on behalf of Karen Anderson. Rebecca, you may want to abstain, because you've been at a few hustings and debates, and you've had the chance to get to know each other during this campaign. What qualities do you most admire in your opponents, and why? Nigel?
I'll start. There are two of our opponents aren't actually here tonight, and they are much more funny, I think, than the three of us in some ways. You're very unlucky not to get Mark Patton, who has the best jokes. He's an anaesthetist at the Luton and Dunstable Hospital. Whenever he goes into Hustings, his first line is, I've sent many of you to sleep before, and I will do the same again tonight. And the other candidate, the Reform candidate, went in Harpenden to a skateboard park to draw attention to the fact that it was in a bad state of repair and to try and get more money spent on it, and that it was dangerous. Unfortunately, he used the skateboard park, had an accident, and ended up in Luton and Dunstable with a cracked head. So, there's been a lot of fun, and I've certainly enjoyed being with all the different Labour representatives we've had in the course of the campaign, as well as Paul and Victoria.
Nice. Paul?
I noticed you went into detail on the chaps who are not here. Actually, I would like to... I would like to applaud Nigel because I've met many Tories in this particular campaign, and Nigel has spent most of the time on most of these hustings sort of denigrating what the Tory government has been doing. I do worry for him if he does get elected. Of course, he will have to take the whip. And therefore vote with them. But yeah, so he's the closest to Kenneth Clarke I've seen in a Tory for a long time, so I applaud you for that.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Rebecca, do you want to pass or make some judgments on the last 2 hours?
I think, Rebecca, I'm going to applaud you because although you're a former Green member, you're clearly very Green, so I'll applaud you for that. And Victoria, we met at a transition town meeting some while ago, and it was pouring with rain outside. You very kindly gave me a lift home, so I'll thank you for that generosity as well.
So, Rebecca, you only met these three from 6:30?
Yes, although I have seen, I have watched online previous hustings. So,
and your verdict?
What I would like to say is how polite and respectful they've been to each other, and I think that's really important. And, yeah.
So you have to maintain that attitude, Victoria.
Oh gosh, I mean, Paul. I met Paul before and heard so much about the hard work you've done. I think for me, it's the care and diligence that Paul has to a cause he really believes in. That I have a lot to admire, and I think a lot of your kind words, the words you've put in speeches and things, have inspired me. I will say that. I think Mark. It's a shame Mark's not here. I miss his frankness. Mark is our SDP candidate. I think he's extremely frank, and I love that. Saba?
Yeah, if you go on to BBC Sounds, yesterday Mark and Zara, the Labour candidate, were on, and Nigel and Paul and Victoria were on BBC Three Counties Radio at 11:30 with Jonathan Vernon Smith in a hustings for this constituency, very similar to tonight. So it'll be there for the next 4 or 5 days if you want to see that. Oh, thank you. I used to work there, so I know him very well. He did wear a blue suit, and I said, you've got to be neutral, mate. But anyway, we didn't have any questions. We had a lot. We weren't able to get through all of them. We didn't have any questions on the economy, the cost of living crisis, or on tax. We didn't have any questions on crime. We didn't have any questions, really, on immigration. So finally, we drew lots before we started to see the order of the 90-second closing pitch from all four members on the panel here tonight, and once again Nigel came out first, so you have 90 seconds and before Ben stops you.
I want to come back onto a serious topic, actually, because I do want to come back onto Marshcroft, because I do think it is the biggest challenge in many ways facing Tring. And we've talked about the numbers tonight, not just the number of new houses, but the 300 acres of prime greenbelt we would lose, the 3,400 more people, the 2,000 more cars, a 30% increase in the size of the town. Marshcroft, for me, will not just destroy countryside for future generations. It will also mean so much more pressure on schools, on roads, and on GP surgeries. It will fundamentally change Tring, and I don't want to see that happen. So we're at a situation where Michael Gove's turned it down, but Redrow, who I don't very much like as a company, to tell you the truth, have come back, and they're appealing, and they're trying to wear us down. So we need to work with people like Heath over there to fight and make sure this stops. And I think we should do that on a cross-party basis, because I think we're stronger if we fight this together. And for me, that goes for stopping Marshcroft, but it also goes for the NHS. I think we will build a much stronger NHS if we work cross-party, because that is a 20 or 30-year plan. And it also goes for the country. And today is Armed Forces Day.
10 seconds.
Ladies and gentlemen, whatever your politics and whoever you vote for, it would be an honour to represent for you. And I respectfully ask for your support on the 4th of July.
So, Rebecca, you have, on behalf of the Labour Party, 90 seconds.
Okay, yes. So I wanted to remind people that we haven't actually had the election yet. So if you want change, you do have to go and vote for it. I think talk of a Labour supermajority is actually a bit of a Tory tactic, so that Labour supporters feel that they don't need to go out and vote. So obviously, I want a Labour government, and I want fewer Tory MPs. So I would say, remembering, of course, that this is a fight between Lib Dems and Tories, please use your vote, and please use your vote wisely.
Good. 42 seconds under. So finally, Victoria Collins for the Liberal Democrats. What would you like to say?
Well, I mean, thank you very much this evening, and thank you to everyone. And Rebecca, I think you did, not just because of those comments, were fabulous, because you were so nervous, but you're fabulous this evening. I really appreciate your time. This is a pivotal election. Things need to change. Our country is falling apart, and the local issues here are the national ones. There are local issues that I've been campaigning on, but the health and social care crisis, the cost of living crisis, our environmental crisis, these are issues that are touching us here. And it is a two-horse race. I think if it's not clearer this evening, even Conservative Home put out an article conceding that the Liberal Democrats were the ones to win here. Tactical voting websites. We have the major polls such as YouGov say it'll be neck and neck. But this is one of those seats, it will be very close between the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives, so every vote for change will count. And just for fun, and I will say legal fun, the bookmakers are putting their bets on myself to win. So just keep that in mind. But this is... I haven't put any bet on. But really there is a choice here, and it's, do you want more of the same with the Conservatives, or do you want a candidate who has already been working day in, day out? I bring my experience from the European Parliament, from business, but as Mike rightly asked, most importantly is that lived experience from helping my mum, working in communities and making that difference. So please consider voting for myself and the Liberal Democrats.
So finally, you got the right speech here, yes? You got the right script. So, Paul, the host.
Well, Nigel just picked it up and took it away. Okay, sorry. The outcome of this election will determine what sort of country we want to be. Do we continue to destroy our planet with our obsession with endless growth, wasteful production processes? Do we continue destroying social cohesion with rising inequality and crushing life aspirations of young people? Do we continue to denigrate the migrants on whom we rely to fill vital roles in our healthcare sectors because we refuse to invest in public services, training and proper pay? The Green Party takes a different view from the other parties. We cannot fix the economy first and treat public services and the environment as optional extras. The two go together. The 21st century public health system where everyone can be treated quickly and humanely, secure housing at affordable prices, a comprehensive, affordable public transport system and lifelong education from preschool to retirement and beyond. These are the things that form the bedrock of a prosperous, thriving society. And our prosperity can be powered up by creating millions of new jobs in the green energy revolution. Our air will be cleaner, our soils more productive, and waters thriving with nature again. Reforms to our democratic processes and workers' rights mean people will feel much stronger say in their own futures. This election is the only chance to let a future Labour government know that people care about green values. And whoever represents this seat, I'm sure they'll all be fine local constituency MPs. You're going to get a national Labour government, and they will only hear a message via the ballot box if you deliver a strong national green vote share. So I urge you please to vote for hope and to vote for change and to vote green. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the proceedings here at the High Street Baptist Church. I would like to say thank you very much indeed for your attendance. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. And would you give every single person on this platform, apart from myself, a very big round of applause? It's only 8:33, so if you've ever been to any of the book festival sessions I've hosted, you'll know normally we go over by about 45 minutes. But that's because usually there's a bar. But thank you. So I hope you enjoyed it. There's still plenty of time to go home or eat and watch TV. Coldplay are on at 10 on BBC One or whatever. Thank you again. And I hope that the weather's fine and we get a big turnout. I think it was about 67% turnout in the old constituency of South West Herts 5 years ago. We ought to get it up to 75, 80, but maybe not. Thank you so much.